I'm a better preacher than a reader. I've known the Lord for 70 years. And so it's hard to concise a testimony because I got 70 years worth of God teaching me things and telling me what's next and telling me and showing me the mistakes I've made and helping me to realize His Word and realize what He wants to do next. The last time I gave this testimony, and this testimony, by the way, is going to be about being abandoned. I've not been addicted to drugs or alcohol or even smoking, but there's a whole bunch of things that I had to recover from. A whole bunch of character defaults, a whole bunch of trauma in my life that caused me to react in different and various and sundry ways that were not pleasing to God, and I had to learn the difference. And guess what? When I got ordained, my sister-in-law said, "How come you're ordained? What did you ever do to get ordained in the ministry?" She said, you didn't go to college very long." And I said, you're right. I didn't. I was doing the work of the ministry, and it was recognized, and the church ordained me. But the recognition came from the school of neology and hard knocks, and I haven't graduated from that school yet, and I never will. Because God's still doing things in me. So my testimony, when I get done giving it tonight, it's not done. Sorry, it's not finished yet. God's got a whole bunch more He wants me to do. He's got a whole bunch more people He wants me to touch. And He has a whole bunch of people that He wants me to live out His word to, so that they can become Christians and love Him. My verse, I'm going to start out with my verse. And first, this verse, the reason I chose this verse is because I didn't think I would ever amount to anything. Because I had an inferiority, serious inferiority complex from things that happened to me when I was a child. And I'll share that with you. But my verse is, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. That's found in Philippians 4. I think it's like the 13th or 14th verse here. I have to find it and read it. I got to find my reading glasses to read it. When you get old, your eyes get old too. So here's my old eyes. I'm going to read this verse in the Amplified. Paul says I like the Amplified. Now, I just quoted it out of the King James. I can do all things through Christ who strengtheneth me. But the Amplified, the Greek meanings are all written here. Not just a little brief translation, but the whole of the Greek meanings are right here. I can do all things which He has called me to do through Him who strengthens and empowers me to fulfill His purpose. I am self-sufficient in Christ's sufficiency. I am ready for anything and equal to anything through Him who infuses me with inner strength and confident peace. And that's the truth. Without Him, I can do nothing. I proved that a few times on more than one occasion. Okay, now I'm going to read my testimony. I'll get some things out of the way here. And I'll try really hard to read this. I need to bring this up. I can't see it right. Mine's the kind you can just pull up. Thanks. A little more. Right there. Good. Thanks. I'm starting to like you. Well, I was born in 1949, March 15th. That's the Ides of March, if you studied anything. March 15th, during a winter snowstorm. I was number 3 of 9 siblings. Not when I was born. There weren't 9 siblings. There were 3 of us. I was number 3. And we were a close-knit family that fought and played together. Any families out there like that? Where if somebody picked on one of your brothers, you were going to be on his side, but if you and him got in a fight, you were going to whoop him? Yeah, that was our family. My recovery mostly has to do with having to recover from very low self-esteem, as in inferior, complex, extreme. In 1953, this is a few years after I was born, 1953 from 1949. By that time, there were 7 kids. When my twin brothers were born in 51, then there were 6 kids under 5. My mother changed a lot of diapers, and when I was 2 years old, I learned to change diapers, because Mom would stand those twins up on a newspaper and say, "Gaylin, go wash them." And I mean, they were babies, so that wasn't an easy job. 1953, when I was still 4, the family of 7 at the time made a trip in the 1949 Ford. I wish I had that. That's a neat car. In the 1949 Ford to Barney, North Dakota. That's where my mother was from. She was from Barney, North Dakota, which is on the eastern edge of North Dakota, closer maybe to Minnesota than the rest of the state of North Dakota. Barney, North Dakota, to visit relatives of mothers. I do not remember why I was crying and acting out in the car. It's been too long. I can't remember why I was doing that, but I was crying really hard, and I was fussing and acting out. And Dad got really angry and told me to quit crying, or he'd give me something to cry about. And my crying didn't cease, so he reached back and backhanded me on the mouth. And this caused me to cry louder and more. I mean, you can imagine, I'm 4 years old. And he then threatened to put me out of the car if I refused to quit. By this time, I was crying harder, and so he put me out of the car and drove away, leaving me by myself on the prairie. The car went out of sight, and I was devastated. I was devastated thinking I was not loved, and I was completely in a state of shock. A little later, when they returned for me, Mother said, "The only reason we came back is because the other kids were crying." You know what I thought? I thought, why didn't you put them out of the car? Am I the only one you don't love? And I really, really thought that. And that raised Cain with my life the rest of my life, because I sincerely thought that I was the only one of that 7, not only of that 7, but the next 2 that were born later, of the whole 9 that wasn't loved. I was called the black sheep of the family. To my face, I was always referred to as the black sheep. Gaylin must have done it because he's the black sheep. So anything that went wrong at the house, I was blamed for. Now, last time I gave this testimony, a whole bunch of people started feeling sorry for me. And I went home thinking, wow, they got the wrong idea. This testimony isn't about feeling sorry for me because I was mistreated in some ways. This testimony is about what God did to change all that. This testimony is about what God did to help me recover from the effects of those things that happened to me when I was young. And so I'm going to show you, before this testimony is over, I'm going to show you the reconciliation between my father and my mother. So you'll realize they're not bad people, and they're not wicked people, and they're not desperately wrong, and that I'm not the poor little Gaylin, but I'm the rich Gaylin, the spiritual leader in the family who is looked up to and loved and cared about, and whom my brothers to this day come and ask me when they get in a puzzle or a fix. But it's about recovery. It's about what God has done. It's not about how mom and dad made some mistakes that they didn't even want to make, that they just didn't know any better. So, on with the testimony. I gotta find my place now. Okay. So, we've always been disciplined with shame-based tactics. Many times I was told that I was stupid, and that if I had a brain, it would fall out and roll around on the floor like marbles. I had little self-esteem to think I was worth anything. And so I believed I'd never amount to anything. I believed that right to school. I didn't think I'd make it. I had to look at the graduation list to see if I was on it, because I doubted I'd graduate. So those things that happened to me when I was a kid affected me big, really big. And they affected my Christian walk. But let's get on to it. Dad did see to it that we were always in Sunday school on Sunday mornings. And we never missed church meetings. That includes prayer meetings middle of the week. I thank God for that much. I was in the primary days in Sunday school class with a wonderful, loving teacher. Her name is Helen Wetzik. I'll never forget her. She gave us candy every Sunday after. But it wasn't just that candy. She loved us. She cared about us. And here's what she did for me. The Easter after having been put out of the car, Helen told the Easter resurrection and crucifixion story and invited the children in the class to invite Jesus into their hearts. She let us know that Jesus loved us no matter if no one else does. I was 4. I hadn't started school yet, or I might have started school, but I was still 4. I wasn't 5 yet. And I immediately identified with needing Jesus, and I fully understood to believe. So I said my simple prayer in faith, childlike faith. You know why it was childlike faith? Because I was a child. Yeah. And she quoted John 3:16. Of course, we all knew it already when we were 4. And I'm going to say it anyhow. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Read that in the Amplified sometime. For God so what? Dearly loved. It's pretty cool, so look it up sometime in the Amplified. Okay. Make a spectacle of myself here. This was the beginning of recovery, which has taken years. Then as I started school, I discovered that I was not ashamed to talk about Jesus, and I could not understand why my fellow classmates didn't share my value of Jesus, to the point of being pushed off the merry-go-round for talking about Jesus on the playground in kindergarten. The hard disciplines at home were still shame-based, so that I always felt inferior. The Holloway boys and girls went to Bible camp every summer. This became a growing and exciting time for me. God must have known I needed this to maintain my Christian walk. My walk with God was up and down, as I still was reacting to situations instead of responding with Christ-like demeanor and attitude. I retaliated when wrong a good share of the time, and I was vying for attention in all the wrong ways. I didn't dismiss the gospel and salvation, but I hadn't yet made Jesus Lord of my life. I knew him as a Savior. He died for me, but I didn't know him as Lord. I hadn't made him Master. And when I was 15, I asked the Lord to be Lord. But I still had a lot to give up of my own character defects and actions that were results of learning wrong behaviors. You know, some of our behaviors we do, some of them we learn by seeing our parents and seeing other people. So I had a lot of wrong learned behaviors, wrong reactions, wrong types of demeanor and attitudes. God's still working on me in some of these needed principles. And CR has been one of the best answers for the changes. Now, I started in CR because my son and Danny are cousins. Those two were doing drugs together. Sometimes not together, but they were both. And we wanted help for them. Paul wanted help for his son. I wanted help for my son. I went to CR and I discovered, hey, CR's for any trouble I'm having. Anything that hinders my walk with God, and there's a bunch of hindrances all over inside me. And I need help. So that made me more aware of what needed to change in my life. So CR has a big place in my life. The Beatitudes are taught here Even though I have never been a drinker or smoker or drugs or drug addict, I still needed recovery for all else that hindered my relationship with God. I still face things as I still face things as God reveals things that I let hinder my relationship to Him. One of the biggest factors in my recovery is forgiveness. Making amends with people that wronged me, and also having been forgiven by others. Now, this one's big. This is where I want you to see who my dad is and who my mother is now, before they died, before they went to heaven. Dad wrote me a letter in 1970 as I was in the U.S. Army basic training. He said two things that set me free from shame-based discipline. He said, "I love you, son." Dad had never said that to me. He never said that to me. That I went over and sat on some sandbags and wept before the Lord and faced away from my platoon. I couldn't believe he said it. But he wrote it. I mean, it was in writing. I have that letter somewhere at home. And I probably will never give it up. And he said, "I love you, son, and I trust you to make great decisions because you love the Lord." This reflects God's love for me also. I heard God say that through my father. I love you and I trust you. Because my eyes were on Jesus. And that did a world of good for my life. That changed my life. That changed the respect others in the Army, my buddies, had for me. That changed my outlook on life because now I felt worth something. Then in 2010, I visited my mother. I went down to a bluegrass festival, and my brother Joel and I are both ordained in a ministry, and we decided to leave the bluegrass festival and go visit Mom. We love bluegrass. I love picking. I love playing. So we went over to visit her, and here's what Mom said. I visited my mother, and she brought up the put out of the car episode. She's out of the blue. I mean, I didn't say nothing to her about it. She said, "I just wanted to teach you a lesson." And then she let me know that it wasn't intended, they never really intended to leave me there. Then she asked me to officiate at her funeral. My brother had 4 years of Bible college, then he had 3 years of seminary, and he has his master's degree in theology, and all I had was neology and hard knocks. And she asked me to do the funeral. You know what I heard? I heard, "Son, I love you just as much as I love the others." That's what I heard. And that was reconciliation. When we walked out of that place, my brother Joel put his hand on my shoulder. And he said, "Gaylin," he said, "you'll never be the same after today." And he's right. He was right. Joel knew. He watched all that. He saw it all happen. He grew up with me and knew what I was up against. She asked me to officiate her funeral. Gaylin, I love you as much as the rest of your siblings. That's what I heard. Forgiveness was important from God, and it is important for our relationship and each other. I was set free from so much through mom's and dad's forgiveness and reconciliation. This is the end now. Let us now recover all that Satan has stolen from us. Let's continue taking the steps for each situation that hinders our relationship with Jesus. Thank you. And I'm going to sing my life story, my life song. This is my heart that I'm going to sing. I don't think I need